What's going on, Colts Nation? I appreciate you joining me for today's video where I want to talk a little bit more about what Chris Ballard was talking about because that's going to lead into the next conversation we have. So today we're going to talk about Chris Ballard, what he said about Anthony Richardson, and what that means for the offseason approach, kind of what we can take away from what Ballard is saying. And of course, starting just with Anthony Richardson, how's he doing? That kind of stuff. We know he started throwing again. He had the video come out of him throwing. So having him in the throwing program is really good. The fact that he's already getting back to his practicing again, that's good news, right? But he can't get ahead of schedule, which is really what Ballard was talking about. Like he started talking about how even though they're happy about where Anthony Richardson is, they can't get ahead of schedule, right? He doesn't want to get too ahead of schedule. And he noted, living through the last one, which was Andrew Luck and his injury issues and everything like that. And like even to bring up Andrew Luck in that situation, right? Knowing that he's got to learn from the past and he's got to be able to have Anthony Richardson come back and not have any problems. He can't rush this process. So he even mentioned where he said, quote, "So forgive me for being a little cautious." And right there, like, yeah, he's going to be a little cautious, and that's okay. I'd rather him be cautious with Anthony Richardson. He also said, quote, "We're here to pull the reins to make sure we don't get too far ahead of schedule, and we're staying with whatever the doctors are telling us. He's in good shape. He's throwing. He's got a good throwing program. He's got good people working with him. I'm encouraged about where he's at and where he's going, and we'll go from there." So Anthony Richardson should be just fine. They just don't want to rush him back, right? Especially with it being the throwing shoulder is the one that he had surgery on, then you don't want to put too much strain on the part of the body that's being healed, right? You got to work it a little bit. You got to strengthen it back up, right? He's going to have to do some things that put some strain on it, but you understand what I'm saying. You don't want to do too much to where it's having a negative effect. And that's really where the Colts are at with this whole situation. But in terms of free agency, this is what Chris Ballard had to say, where he said, quote, "Free agency, everybody gets excited for that week and stamps a future Super Bowl winner off of that. But what you're seeing is you got the A-level players. Well, what happens with them? They get tagged. So now you got the next level ones that you end up paying A money. If there's one on the market that we think fits us, and look, it takes two sides here. There's times you'll make an offer, a big offer to a player, and you just don't get him, and he goes somewhere else. That's part of it. We'll be as aggressive as we need to be when we think we need to be." And with that quote, that's kind of who Chris Ballard is, right? Over the years, like we call it conservative, he's looking at this as, you know, is this smart business or is this not smart business? And there are definitely things that we as fans disagree on with Chris Ballard over the years. But this upcoming season, when you look at it, like he's talking about A-level players here. Like, yeah, are there A-level players from this year's free agent class that we would want to add to what we have for the 2024 roster? Yeah, there are a couple that you might say we want to go get, but for the most part, I don't know about A-level players, right? L'Jarius Sneed is one we've talked about. That might be about it in terms of A-level players that it makes perfect sense to give money to. But when you look at everything else, like I just think in terms of free agency, we're going to try to pay our guys and we're going to get some of the lower level guys to fill in roles. And again, one of those guys, a key guy that I think the Colts really could make a run at and could fit us and could create competition at a position need. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. But to continue today's conversation, we're talking about the Colts needing to build around Anthony Richardson, right? We know they need to get the weapons. Well, what about the offensive line? When you look at the offensive line in 2023, the offensive line that has been heavily criticized still. There are people that will still say Colts offensive line needs to get better. Right? They allowed the third fewest sacks in the NFL while also having the sixth lowest pressure rate at 25%. The sixth lowest pressure rate. Okay, now even I was surprised by that one. I thought the pressure rate was higher. So the Colts offensive line did really well for all the people that ended up playing, right? You had Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, Bernard Raymond, Will Fries, Braden Smith, and you had some backups play like Blake Freeland and Wesley French. And all 7 of those guys are coming back. So the offensive line is solidified. They're going to have another year in this system. So Ballard had mentioned earlier about how he knows that they need to be able to protect Anthony Richardson. He feels pretty good about that. The Colts feel pretty good about that right now. So it's something that throughout this offseason, probably not going to be a huge thing, right? They're probably going to try to get a depth piece or two for the offensive line, but that's about it. And then everything else after that point was about Chris Ballard talking about how explosive Anthony Richardson is and how good they expect him to be, but you can't expect him to be Superman right away, right? It's basically going to be his rookie season because he only played in 4 games last year. So when you look at 2024, there's got to be some leeway, right? You can't expect everything right away. You can just expect him to continue to get better throughout the season. But he did continue to mention how he's explosive and how they need to get more people around Anthony Richardson. I said the number one thing is to protect him. Number 2 is to try to put the best players that you can around. And the question becomes, how does Chris Ballard and the Colts, how are they going to put those players around him? Who are they going to put around Anthony Richardson to try to maximize what he can do? And that's what we're going to continue talking about tomorrow when we talk a free agent target and who we should go get tomorrow. And we're going to continue having those conversations as the days roll on. So make sure you're subscribed with notifications on so you get notified when any of these videos do come out. Of course, I appreciate you stopping by for another video. And as always, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and go Colts.